Listen up, because what I'm about to tell you isn't just a history lesson. These are the 10 military units that didn't just fight wars, they rewrote the rules of what terror on a battlefield actually looks like. Units so ruthless, so efficient, and so psychologically devastating that entire empires trembled when they heard their names. Some of them wiped out armies 10 times their size. Others turned the tide of history with nothing but blades, horses, and unbreakable will. And one of them, they were so feared that enemies literally killed themselves rather than face them in combat. If you've ever wondered what it really takes to become the most terrifying force on a battlefield, stay until the end. Because by the time this video is over, you'll understand why these units weren't just soldiers. They were living nightmares, weapons of pure dread, and in some cases, the last thing entire civilizations ever saw coming. But before we begin, here's something most people get completely wrong about elite military units. It's never about the weapons. It's never even about the training. It's about the mindset, the willingness to push past every limit of human endurance, morality, and fear itself. These units didn't just break their enemies' bodies, they shattered their will to fight before a single arrow was loosed or bullet fired. So let's count them down, starting with number 10. At number 10, we have the French Foreign Legion's 2nd Foreign Parachute Regiment during the Battle of Dien Bien Phu. And if you think modern special forces invented brutality, these men are about to prove you wrong. In 1954, 13,000 French troops were surrounded by 50,000 Viet Minh in the worst siege of the 20th century. The Legion's paras were dropped into hell itself, no resupply, no hope of evacuation, just mud, malaria, and an enemy that never stopped coming. These weren't ordinary soldiers. The Foreign Legion only accepts men with nothing left to lose. Criminals, exiles, broken souls looking for redemption or death, and at Dien Bien Phu, they found both. They fought from trench to trench, often hand to hand with bayonets when ammo ran dry. They held strongpoints with names like Beatrice, Gabrielle, and Elaine, names that still haunt French military history. When the Viet Minh overran a position, the legionnaires didn't retreat. They counter-attacked immediately, often at night, screaming through the darkness like demons. One Legion company, reduced to just 30 men, held off an entire Viet Minh regiment for hours. When they finally ran out of ammunition, they fixed bayonets and charged. Only 3 survived. The Viet Minh commander later admitted the Legion's ferocity terrified his troops more than any other unit. Even when the fortress fell, the Legion marched out with colors flying, singing their regimental song. Prisoners. Most chose death over surrender. The second rap showed the world that even in total defeat, a unit's reputation can live forever. They didn't win the battle, but they made sure the Viet Minh never forgot the price of victory. Moving to number 9, the Gurkhas of the British Army. And if you've never heard an enemy soldier describe them, you've missed one of history's greatest horror stories. These Nepalese warriors have served the British crown for over 200 years, and their motto isn't just words. Ao Gorkali, the Gurkhas are coming, was the last thing thousands heard before dying. In World War I, German troops wrote home about black devils with huge knives that attacked at night without making a sound. In World War II, a single Gurkha rifleman, Lakhuman Garung, lost his right hand to a Japanese grenade. What did he do? He picked up live grenades with his left hand and threw them back for 4 hours, holding his trench alone. When dawn came, 87 Japanese lay dead in front of him. He was 4'11". In the Falklands War, Argentine conscripts, many just teenagers, were ordered to hold Mount William against a Gurkha assault. When they heard the Gurkhas were coming, entire units abandoned their positions and ran. Some reportedly shot themselves rather than face the Kukris. The Gurkha selection process is legendary. Candidates must carry a 35-kilogram rock up a mountain in under an hour. Then they wrestle each other until only the strongest remain. The British officers say the quiet ones are the most dangerous. Because when a Gurkha smiles, someone's about to die. Their war cry still sends chills through modern battlefields. Because when you hear, Ao Gorkali, in the dark, it's already too late. At number 8, we have the Spartan graduates, specifically the 300, who stood at Thermopylae. And yes, you've seen the movie. But the reality was far, far worse. These weren't actors with abs. These were men who had survived training that killed most boys before adulthood. From age 7, Spartan boys were taken from their mothers and thrown into a system designed to create perfect killers. They were starved, beaten, forced to fight each other for scraps of food. Every year, they participated in the Kriptaya, a ritual where they hunted and killed helots, slaves, in the dark to prove their stealth. By the time they reached adulthood, they had already survived more pain than most soldiers experience in a lifetime. Pain was their normal, fear was alien to them. At Thermopylae, 300 Spartans, led by Leonidas, held a narrow pass against perhaps 200 Zhaos and Persians for 3 days. They weren't trying to win. They were buying time for Greece to organize. And they did it, knowing they would die. When the Persians demanded they surrender their weapons, Leonidas replied, "Come and take them." When a Persian general boasted that their arrows would blot out the sun, a Spartan famously said, "Good. Then we'll fight in the shade." On the final day, when betrayal showed the Persians a hidden path, the 300 didn't run. They formed a circle and fought to the last man. Archaeologists have found the hill where they made their final stand, covered in Persian arrowheads 3 feet deep. The Spartans didn't just delay the Persians, they broke their myth of invincibility. And they proved that a few hundred men with the right training and mindset could terrify an empire. Number 7 brings us to the Māori warriors of New Zealand, specifically the Te Reo and Métis Toe tribes during the Musket Wars. When Europeans introduced firearms to New Zealand in the early 1800s, the Māori didn't just adopt them. They perfected a form of warfare that combined traditional ferocity with modern weapons and created something apocalyptic. Māori warriors were already terrifying before guns. They practiced a form of combat that involved getting within arm's reach to use the mere, a jade club designed to cave in skulls. They ate their enemies to absorb their mana, spiritual powered. They tattooed their faces with stories of their kills. Then they got muskets. Suddenly, war parties of a few hundred warriors could annihilate thousands. The Ngati Toa under Chief Te Raparaha conducted raids that depopulated entire regions. One famous campaign saw 2,000 warriors attack a fortified Pass Hill fort held by 5,000 people. They won in hours. But the most terrifying part, their psychological warfare. Before an attack, they would perform the Purupuru, a war haka that involved bulging eyes, protruding tongues, and rhythmic slapping that sounded like approaching thunder. Defenders often broke and ran before the first shot was fired. Te Raparaha once tricked an entire tribe into gathering for a fake peace conference, then massacred them all. He wrote a famous haka about it that's still performed today, celebrating how he devoured his enemies. In 30 years, the Musket Wars killed perhaps 20% of the entire Māori population. Mostly Māori killing Māori with tactics so ruthless that when British troops later fought them, they wrote home in horror about facing demons. At number 6, we have the Comanche horse warriors of the American plains. And if you think Native American warfare was primitive, the Comanches are about to change your mind forever. From the early 1700s to the late 1800s, a nation of perhaps 20,000 people dominated a territory larger than Western Europe, Texas, New Mexico, parts of Colorado, Kansas, and Oklahoma. All bowed to the Comanche. They didn't just raid, they annihilated Spanish colonies, Mexican villages, Apache tribes, even other plains nations. All were either destroyed or paid tribute. The Comanches mastered horse warfare to a degree never seen before or since. They could fire arrows accurately at full gallop, up to 20 arrows in the time a musketman could fire once. They rode into battle naked except for war paint and a shield made of layered buffalo hide that could stop musket balls. Their favorite tactic, the false retreat. They would attack, seem to break and run, then wheel around and slaughter pursuers. Mexican soldiers called it El Alacrán, the scorpion, because the Comanches would strike and vanish like a scorpion's tail. They took scalps. They took captives, especially children, to raise as Comanches. They tortured prisoners in ways that made hardened frontiersmen vomit. One Spanish expedition of 2,000 men sent to punish them was wiped out to the last man. The Comanches didn't lose a single warrior. Even the U.S. Army struggled. It took the invention of repeating rifles and the near extinction of the buffalo to finally break Comanche power. Their last great war leader, Quanah Parker, only surrendered when his people were literally starving. The Comanches were just the greatest light cavalry in history. They were a nation that made the American West their empire through pure, unrelenting terror. Number 5 brings us to the Varangian Guard, the Viking elite who became the Byzantine emperor's personal bodyguard. And if you thought Vikings were scary on their longships, wait until you see what happened when they got paid to be the most loyal killers in the medieval world. From the 10th to 14th centuries, the Varangians were primarily Norse, then Anglo-Saxon warriors who swore absolute loyalty to the Byzantine emperor. They were huge. They carried massive two-handed axes that could cleave a horse in half. And they drank like only Vikings can drink. Their oath was simple total devotion to the emperor. No matter who he was, even if he just murdered the previous emperor to take the throne. They were immune to bribery. Legend says they cared more about loot than politics. They fought. Drunk Byzantine chroniclers wrote about them charging into battle singing and laughing. And they never broke formation. In 1081, at the Battle of Dyrrhachium, a Varangian detachment was surrounded by Norman knights. Instead of surrendering, they formed a circle and fought to the last man. The Normans were so impressed they wrote poems about their courage. But the most terrifying moment came in 1204, during the Fourth Crusade. The Crusaders, supposedly Christian knights, sacked Constantinople, the greatest city in Christendom. The Varangians, now mostly English after the Norman conquest, were ordered to defend the city. They held the walls for days against overwhelming numbers. When the city finally fell, the last Varangians made their stand in the Hagia Sophia itself. Drunk on stolen communion wine, they fought with axes until everyone was dead. The Crusaders wrote that even after death, the Varangians looked terrifying, giant blonde and red-haired corpses surrounded by piles of enemy dead. The Varangian Guard proved that loyalty, when combined with Viking berserker spirit, created something no army wanted to face. At number 4, we have the Janissaries of the Ottoman Empire. And if you think child soldiers can't be terrifying, the Janissaries will change your mind in the worst way possible. The Janissaries were Christian boys stolen from their families in the Balkans, forcibly converted to Islam, and raised from childhood to be the perfect soldiers. No family, no mercy, no fear of death, because they believed dying in battle guaranteed paradise. They were the first standing army in Europe since Rome, the first to use massed gunfire tactics, and they were fanatically loyal to the Sultan. From the 1400s to 1800s, they conquered everything in their path. At the Siege of Constantinople in 1453, it was the Janissaries who finally breached the Theodosian walls after 800 years of failure. They charged into breaches filled with their own dead, stepping over corpses to keep coming. They fought with a combination of gunpowder and cold steel that no one could match. Their marching bands, the meter, played music so loud and disturbing that enemies often broke before contact. But the most terrifying part, their discipline. They lived in barracks like monks, no wives, no property, only war. When they finally turned on the sultans in the 1800s, after centuries of privilege made them corrupt, it took the Ottoman Empire's entire reformed army to destroy them. In the auspicious incident of 1826, the Janissaries were bombarded with artillery in their own barracks. Thousands died. The survivors were hunted down and strangled. The Janissaries were just an elite unit. They were a death cult with guns. And for 400 years, they made Europe tremble. Number 3 brings us to the Sacred Band of Thebes, an ancient Greek unit that wasn't just elite, it was revolutionary. In the 4th century BC, most Greek cities fielded citizen militias. Thebes created something different: 300 warriors paired as lovers, 150 couples. Each man swore to protect his partner with his life. They trained together, lived together, and died together. The theory was simple: no man would ever show cowardice in front of his lover. At the Battle of Leuctra in 371 BC, this tiny force of 300 destroyed the Spartan army that had dominated Greece for centuries. They attacked the Spartan right wing, where the best Spartan warriors stood, and annihilated them. The Spartans, who prided themselves on never retreating, broke and ran for the first time in recorded history. At Chaeronea in 338 BC, the sacred band made their final stand against Philip of Macedon and his son Alexander. Surrounded and outnumbered, they fought until every single man was dead. Philip himself wept when he saw their bodies, still in pairs, shield by shield. The sacred band proved that the bond between warriors could be stronger than any weapon. And they humiliated the Spartans so completely that Sparta never recovered as a great power. Their graves were discovered in 1880 to 254 skeletons arranged in perfect formation. Still together, even in death. At number 2, we have the Mongol Tumans under Genghis Khan. And if you think any unit before gunpowder could match what came later, the Mongols laugh at your ignorance. A Tuman was 10,000 horse archers, perfectly disciplined, perfectly mobile, perfectly merciless. Under Genghis and his successors, they conquered more territory than any empire in history, an area larger than Africa. In less than 100 years, their tactics were centuries ahead of their time. Find retreats that could last for days, luring enemies deep into traps. Encircling maneuvers that trapped entire armies. The use of terror as a weapon. Cities that resisted were annihilated so completely that others surrendered without a fight. At the Battle of the Kulka River in 1223, a Mongol Tuman destroyed a combined Russian army 10 times its size. They pursued the survivors for days, killing princes and nobles in ways designed to maximize humiliation. They poured molten silver into the eyes and ears of captured kings. They used prisoners as human shields. They built pyramids of skulls outside conquered cities. But the most terrifying part, their discipline. A single Tuman could travel 100 miles in a day. They lived off the land, drinking horse blood when necessary. Every man could fire 60 arrows a minute accurately from horseback. When Subutai, the greatest of Mongol generals, invaded Europe in 1241, he destroyed Hungarian, Polish and Teutonic knight armies in the space of 3 days. At Legnica and Moti, heavily armored European knights were run down and shot to pieces by horse archers they couldn't even catch. Europe only survived because the great Khan died and the Tumans withdrew to elect a new leader. The Mongols didn't just conquer. They created a psychological scar across Eurasia that lasted centuries. To this day, in parts of Central Asia, parents still scare children with stories of the Mongol hordes. And finally, at number 1, the unit so terrifying that even speaking their name was forbidden in some cultures. The Hashishin, the original assassins. From their mountain fortresses in Persia and Syria, this sect of Ismaili Muslims operated from the 11th to 13th centuries. Their leader, the Old Man of the Mountain, commanded absolute obedience. Their weapon wasn't armies, it was terror. A single Hashishin could infiltrate any court, any palace, any harem, disguised as servants, musicians, or even bodyguards. And when the moment was right, they would strike with a poisoned dagger. Then die smiling, believing paradise awaited. They killed kings, viziers, generals, crusader leaders. Their most famous victim, Conrad of Montferrat, king of Jerusalem, assassinated in 1192 by 2 Hashishin disguised as Christian monks. Saladin, the greatest Muslim commander of the age, woke one morning to find a poisoned cake and a note on his pillow. What can reach you anywhere? He immediately made peace. The Hashishin didn't need to win battles. They won minds. Their training was legendary. Recruits were drugged and woken in artificial paradises filled with beautiful women and pleasures. Then told this was a taste of the heaven awaiting those who died for the cause. Whether the stories of hashish use are true or not, the psychological effect was devastating. Rulers lived in fear. Bodyguards became suspects. Alliances crumbled. The Mongols finally destroyed their fortresses in 1256. But it took Hulagu Khan, destroyer of empires, years to root them out. Even then, many Hashishin simply vanished into legend. The word, assassin, comes from their name, and for good reason. They weren't an army, they were a plague. A nightmare made flesh. The ultimate proof that sometimes, the most dangerous unit isn't the largest. It's the one that can kill a king with a whisper and a dagger. So there you have it. The 10 most feared military units in human history, from the pairs of Dien Bien Phu to the Hashishin, who made empires tremble with a single death. These weren't just soldiers. They were the edge of human capability, pushed into darkness. The point where discipline, training, and terror became something more than human. Drop a comment and let me know which unit terrified you the most. And if you want more content about the darkest, most brutal chapters of military history, subscribe. Because we've only just begun. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.